Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Zoltan Toth. I am a Key Accounts Manager at Graphisoft North America. And today I would like to show you how to set up your Rhino-Grasshopper-Archicad toolset to benefit from the combined power of all these great applications. I will also show you some basic workflows to get you started, and we can also look at some learning resources that you have. The first thing that you will want to do is obviously get your educational copy of Archicad that you can get at myarchicad.graphisoft.com. Once you have that, you will want to go to our website, graphisoft.com. And if you go to the top right corner, you can go to support. And under downloads, you will see Archicad add-ons. This is where you will find a lot of cool add-ons that open up Archicad to a number of other applications. And obviously a very important one would be the Rhino-Grasshopper-Archicad toolset. When you click on that, it will call out the prerequisites. So obviously for this, you have to have Archicad on your computer, and you also have to have Rhino. So there is a link right there for you. You can get your EDU copy for Rhino as well. Once you installed both of those softwares, you will then download the live connection right here based on your Archicad version and obviously your OS, whether you're on Mac on PC. Right here, you will find the user guide as well. So additionally to just Googling and YouTube or community.graphisoft.com, you can also just go through the user guide. It is a really good learning resource. You might want to download this and keep it for your learning purposes. But this will give you all of the basic functionality from the connection along with some great workflow examples. So you will see actual definitions in here that you can copy and reverse engineer. It's also important to mention that you can only have this connection installed on top of one Archicad version. So if you have both, let's say 25 and 26 on your computer, you will have to make a choice on which one you will want to use with Rhino and Grasshopper. Okay, so I will jump over to Archicad here. I also have Rhino open, and I'm going to jump back onto my first floor plan in Archicad. I'm just using the stock template in both programs. Just make sure that you're on the same page in terms of working units. So I decided to use feet in this example. You could use inches, obviously, and you could use the metric system as well. So once you run the installer, it will actually create an add-on in both programs. If I jump over to Rhino here and start up my Grasshopper, it's going to split my screen even more. So I just open up a blank file. I have blank files open, but I obviously recommend that when you're doing actual work, please make sure to save your work. And I will create a new file inside Grasshopper. So this is the familiar Grasshopper interface. The big difference here will be that number one, up at the top, you will see an Archicad tab. You will also see an Archicad menu item, which will give you the Archicad connection palette. And then also down here, you will see an Archicad icon that will basically do the same thing. It opens up the palette. Right away, I can connect. I don't have to save my files, but again, let me reiterate that it's good to save your files. There will be a port number set up here by default. When I jump over to Archicad and I go to my connection add-on, the easiest way to do that would be to go to Window, Palettes, and Grasshopper connection. So this is the Archicad side of things. These two palettes will basically show you the same information. And if you click on the little information button here, it will tell you the port number that you will have to set your Grasshopper side to. It should work out of the box. Shouldn't really worry about that. But even at this point, I can start connecting Archicad and Grasshopper, and I can start doing my work. So the concept here is that I can now define any sort of geometry or data in any one of the three programs. So let me just show you a very basic example here. I'm going to use one of the components in Rhino. So let's start with a curve. Just trying to make sure that I'm zoomed out enough so that my curve is big enough so that you will be able to properly see it on the screen. I can pick this curve up inside my grasshopper as a parameter. So now I have that geometry inside Grasshopper. And I'm sure that you noticed if I go to the top and look at the Archicad tab here, you will have a number of different groupings of elements. So the first one would be deconstruct. This is when you take something from Archicad, let's say a wall, and you deconstruct the geometry or the parameters from that wall. The second option is design. This is when you want to place a 3D component inside Archicad that is driven by Grasshopper. The third one is document. These are two-dimensional documentation elements that you can place on your drawings. Then you will have some other components here like extract settings. This goes with the deconstruct option, right? If you deconstruct a wall, for example, you can then extract the height setting from that wall. Then you will have some inputs. This will give you access to all of your Archicad attributes like profiles or building materials. The next one would be parameters. And then in the end, you will have the settings that are native to the Archicad components and GDL objects. For this one, I'm going to be using the design tools and I will be placing a beam. It really behaves the same as any other Grasshopper component. So you will have the inputs on the left-hand side and the output from this one will be an Archicad beam. If you hover over the inputs, obviously it will give you the name of that input. So this is the synchronize parameter. So for this one, I recommend using a little Boolean toggle where you can tell Grasshopper whether you want it to synchronize your data to Archicad or not. Once I have that set to false, so it will not do it right away until I press that button, then I can connect my curve to the curve input of the beam. And if I double click on my toggle, it will set the connection in motion. And you will see that the beam shows up inside Archicad in real time. Now what the settings are for that beam, that would be the default settings inside Archicad. So if you want to set the height, for example, of that beam, you have to do that in Archicad first and then turn on the connection. Or maybe a better organized way to do that would be to place the beam settings component inside Grasshopper. You can find it in the list or you can just double click on your canvas and find it if you type beam. So I place the beam settings here, connect that to my component right there. And if I zoom in on it and go through the options here, you will see you can set up the building material, the height, the width, and so on and so forth. So let me just show you a quick example here. If I wanted to set up the building material, this is where my inputs will come handy. When I click on that, this is my attributes from Archicad, so I can select the building materials. And this little component will give me access to all of the building materials from within Archicad. So I'm just going to go to metals here and select some sort of a structural metal, connect it to my building material, and inside Archicad in real time, pretty much this model will update. At this point, all of these components will be locked. If you started inside Grasshopper and push the data to Archicad, there's no way to edit that data in Archicad until you actually go ahead and unlock those elements, at which point they will be separated from your script and you can continue editing inside Archicad. Okay, so I'm just going to jump back into my little script here. And obviously, this is something that, once you have finalized your geometry, you would just group it and you can give your group a name. and then move on to the next components. Okay, so I will delete this and give you a second example, maybe a little more complex. So in this case, I will start inside Archicad just to show you a different example here. I will go back to floor plan and start with a slab inside Archicad. We could create whatever shape we want. It's going to go free form here. Okay, there is our slab. This is actually a very practical application. So now my idea would be to apply a wall or a curtain wall along the boundary of this slab and maybe a roof. And I want to make sure that if I change that base geometry or base shape inside Archicad, my whole building updates. So I will just come over back to my Grasshopper canvas here. And in this case, I will use the deconstruct slab component. And here you can either directly click on the slab input and select your slab inside Archicad, but I actually like to use the parameter component to pick that up. You know, it makes things a little cleaner. There's my slab. I connect it to the input. It would also allow me to use this same slab for multiple different definitions very easily. Then I will click on that parameter, set one slab in Archicad, or you can select multiple slabs, obviously. It actually just jumped over to the Archicad side and allows me to select that one slab. This will always give you either a detailed or a simple preview inside Rhino, which setting is right here in the Archicad connection palette. Okay, so now I have that. Now I want to do two things. Number one, I would like to get that polygon, so I will turn that into a curve, which will become the outline of my walls. And you can also turn it into a B-rep. So this would just be 3D surface geometry, basically. And then you can extract all of the slab settings as well. So this is kind of the opposite of what we did before, where we used the settings as inputs. Now we will use them as actually inputs for other things. Right, so now all of a sudden I have access to the building material and so on and so forth. Let me place a little panel inside Grasshopper to show you what that building material is. I will get an error message because I'm actually using a composite structure instead of a single building material. And one thing I forgot to do is to set the Archicad palette to sync changes to Grasshopper. You typically don't want your computer to push data constantly. You want to have some sort of a gateway there. Okay, so you can see that as I change the material inside Archicad, it updates in Grasshopper as well. And then you get access to multiple parameters, obviously. Okay, so I'm just going to go with that for now. And here's my little input. I can group this and call it base slab from Archicad. And then I will use the wall component now. I'm just going to double click here to make things faster. This would be the Archicad wall. I will add the Boolean toggle. Set it to false at this point. For the second parameter, I can hover to ask Grasshopper what it needs. So I will connect the curve. I will also add the settings for the wall. Connect it. Now here there's a little trick. To change the structure of that wall, the basic structure, whether it's composite or a single building material, you will have to right-click on that little icon and you can change your structure to basic structure. So let's just keep things simple so that I get the building material as a setting. I can take the building material output from here and input it into that wall. So that will ensure that my wall will be the same material as the slab. And when I go ahead and change this to true, you will see that Archicad will generate that wall that is not connected to my base geometry. So I created a wall and slab system that is associative right now. So you will see as long as I keep that connection live and I go ahead and change the Archicad geometry for the slab, the walls will follow thanks to the grasshopper definition. Okay, let's go back to my original shape here. Coming back to grasshopper, and the last thing would be to group the wall as well and call it wall system. And then let's also add a simple roof here. So for this one, I will just use the, let's say, a single plane roof from Archicad. I will steal my little toggle from the top here, set it to false at this point. If I zoom in, you can see that, again, the roof is asking for a polygon. So I can just take the same polygon from here. I'm still connected to that deconstructed polygon. If you want, you can also make the wire on that side disappear. Just make it hidden so that you keep your canvas clean, connect it, and then let's say I want to make it the same material as everything else. So I will add the roof settings here, connect it to the same building material. Of course, I have to make sure that the structure is the same, which would be basic. Here I will have to get a little tricky actually, because when I turn this on, the roof shows up in the same plane as my base slab. And this is what Grasshopper is really excellent at. So all I need to do is take my base curve and I'm going to add a move command. So now for this move, I will need to enter the geometry, which would be my curve. And I will add a Z unit vector because I want to move it up. And then I will add a slider that will define my story heights. For this application, maybe let's just start at 10. This will be our story height. And connect it. And make this 0 to 20. And then I take that geometry and connect it to my polyline for the roof. That automatically put the roof at 10 feet. So I'm going to group these components and call that little definition story height. And I will call this part roof. And now as a last step, just to make this really nice and everything work together, I can take my story height. Actually, let me connect it to an integer. And use that integer as my wall height. So now I have a system where if I move the story height slider, it will not only move the roof, but it also will change the wall height. So I have a really nice little building system that is based on this one slab inside Archicad. And even if at this point I go back to the base slab and select it in here, I changed the geometry earlier. Now I'm going to change the material. So let's say I'm just going to go with a wood. Can go with plywood. and it changes the entire Archicad model. So that's the basic workflow. Now, one more thing that I wanted to point out to you is that if I just pull up Archicad here and move this out of the way a little bit, inside Archicad, out of the box, there is an environment that is very similar to Grasshopper. If you go to File, Libraries and Objects, and PARAM-O Manager, here you can create new Archicad objects. This interface is very, very similar to Grasshopper, where you can, let's say, create a block, drop it on the canvas here, and then you can start using, let's say, length parameters to connect to the size and change the size of that object. The big difference here is that this is not intended to run the geometry of walls and smart building components. This is an environment where you can create custom Archicad objects. So in that sense, it could actually be connected to Grasshopper, and you can use the combined power of these applications.